Hello, Mike, and I'm Dr. Anatole, and we're doing another Zoom call today, trying different light configurations. What should we talk about today?
I was thinking a good topic to talk about would be boundaries. When you talk about spirituality, there are many reasons to talk about boundaries, but sometimes, even in interpersonal relationships, it's good to talk about boundaries.
Well, the very first thing that comes to mind is that I think in so-called New Age circles, all those people who smoke and do other circus spiritual things. I mean, smoke grass. What passes for spirituality is this dissolution of boundaries, and we will define what boundaries are. So basically becoming spaced out and disassociated. And
Yeah,
in my experience in India and with other serious yogis, independent of their original or of their origin and nationality, they have a very strong sense of themselves. In other words, they most certainly are not wishy-washy, spaced out people. Even though in India you'll find lots of people who smoke ganja and they're spaced out. And so one thing that we need to talk about is that, in my famous quoting, stealing these three terms, egoic, pre-egoic, and trans-egoic development. And these terms might have been outdated by now, but I really like talking in a simple way. And the reason for it is because I think that spiritual path is a path of action, not about talk. And what shouldn't be simple is the actions. They should be deep and direct, and talk can be simple. So anyway, what is pre-egoic development? So what happens is, like, you have a child who has not yet formed his or her personality, does not quite know what he or she wants, and it has he or she has a pretty fluid sense of self, or what I call in my books nowadays, mind, ego, personality, MEP. And one thing that happens as we mature, and it doesn't necessarily depend on age, but as we grow, our ego gets more solidified. I'm not sure if solidification is a good word. It gets better sense. It gets better boundaries. It gets better understanding what it likes and what it doesn't like. So we get a sense of what we like, what we want, what we allow and what we disallow. Some people like to be touched. Some people do not like to be touched. Some people like to be complimented. Other people don't like to be complimented. Some people like to be disturbed by multiple text messages, and other people, they, to get any kind of work done, they turn off their phone, turn off their internet, and they focus on writing, and maybe go to some cabin in the middle of nowhere in the woods where there is none of that kind of stuff and no cell phone reception, or they break their phone altogether, or throwing it down the creek or something. So we have all these kind of things. And how do we know about who we are? Well, first of all, we know who we are over the whole lifetime. You can find an 80-year-old who doesn't exactly know who they are in some area, but at a certain moment we have that solid understanding of who we are, and what do we bring to this incarnate existence. There is a reason why we're in the body, why we're individuals, why we are not, why we are not just, transcendental gods. Talking of which, the third stage, transegoic. Transegoic is that when you have a fairly solid personality, you can then talk about transcending it. And why would you want to transcend it? Well, you want to transcend it because you realize that you're limitless. You are a spark of God. And I mean realize, not talk about it, not think that it is amazing and fantastic and wow, wow. But you literally feel imprisoned, stuck in your personality, in your body. That's what I call spiritual pain. And then you want to transcend that state. And that would be trans-egoic development. And trans-egoic development is very frequently confused with pre-egoic development because they look to uneducated, let's say unwise person. They look similar. Both appear to be kind of wishy-washy to an egoic person, but there is a huge difference between these two. One is pre-egoic, a childish rather. It would be childlike in children, but it would be childish in adults who should have developed their ego development. So trans-egoic would be that. So within that, any trans-egoic person in that stage of development, they can choose to enforce their boundaries, and they should, because if you want to transcend yourself, you're still transcending yourself in the body, in the ego, and you don't really want to be killed, molested, harassed, or any other way abused by other people. Your boundaries shouldn't be abused. So you will find in India something like that. People who are doing serious meditation, they're concerned about their vibration because any touch can damage another person and can damage them. So they will not let you sit under a blanket. They will not let you sit, like in my case, on this sofa on which I'm sitting right now. For me, it's a strict rule. Like, I do not want to have people sleeping in my bed. I do not want to have people sitting on my couch, etc. Or in my meditation blanket, if I have it. Right now, I don't have any. But if I would, I would. So you will find that kind of thing, that people are very, particular about, their seat. So healthy people, emotionally healthy people, will have healthy ego, and they enforce their healthy boundaries. Well, boundaries do not have to be healthy. Some people don't have them healthy. And this is the last thing I'm going to say before I let you respond. And that is that in the West, and probably less so in India, we have usually mixed up spiritual development with emotional development. Many people, they are looking for spiritual development where they would really be benefited by psychotherapy more than anything else. So that is because they want to kind of come back to the pre-egoic stage. They want it to last longer, I'm guessing. And, so they need to understand that transcending the self, going for spirituality, so to speak, they need to have a healthy ego. Otherwise, they'll become crazy. One of the best ways how to lose your mind is trying to do forceful, particularly tantric practices, not the bullshit California variety. If you do that, if you force your mind into high states of meditation and whatnot, you will, you can make yourself crazy if you're not healthy. It's the same way. It's like, if you're, fat and you have heart issues and whatnot, and you start running 10 miles every day, as they would do in some stupid army environment, well, you'll have a heart attack before you'll run anywhere. It's just, you need to have preparation, and preparation for spiritual path is that you are approaching trans-egoic areas of your development, not before. And of course, trans-egoic is so interesting. It's like, you don't care about bills, you don't care about having a job, money, appears from nowhere. you can basically sit here and meditate, and money just descends on you. No, it doesn't happen like this. I mean, I know I have a friend who is actually quite a bit older than me, and he never has any money, but he always takes these workshops about how to become rich and how to become, how to manage your finances, which he never has any. This is like you know, my response to it, well, come to me and I'll tell you to get a job. Because if you are still trying to deal with your childish ego and you're 70, there's a little bit of a problem.
Right. So, well, it's interesting. I might come at this from a couple different angles. So I apologize if it comes out a little discombobulated.
We're having a conversation, so
sure.
Don't even worry about it. I am the king of discombobulated talk, so
okay.
Don't.
So when I think about boundaries, especially when I consider talking with you about them, I specifically think about how we have spoken quite a lot about thought forms and how they create boundaries for us, and that we need to break through those boundaries to, in some cases, find our true selves. But then, living in a practical world, having relationships with other people, I also find that every person has their own boundaries, and every person has their own general, I want to say, spectrum of how much they like or don't like testing other people's boundaries, and awareness of that spectrum, by the way. So some folks, usually in their childhood, I think it's part of mental social development in some form or fashion, but I'm not an expert on these things. But people tend to learn in a young age what is more acceptable or less acceptable in terms of boundary pushing. Most teaching of rearing children suggests that children thrive in an environment where they understand their boundaries, so that they're less likely to get themselves in trouble that they don't understand and don't accept. You tell them what their boundary is, and then when they cross over it, you tell them you crossed over it, you're in trouble, and you reinforce that. Again, not an expert in that field either, but just speaking generally. So it's just interesting to me to find every once in a while somebody in their adult years, even if they're not a mature adult, as you've uh, distinguished even earlier in this own video. But it's interesting to find somebody who is older in years who does not know when to stop testing boundaries of the people around them. And it's at that point, it turns into a question of whether everybody around them is enabling them to be this person, or whether they're just going to be this person no matter what anyway, or maybe a mix of both.
Okay, you want me to respond?
Sure.
So number one, my second book, Abandoning Exile, is pretty entirely written for people who are in trans-egoic stage. In other words, it is definitely for people who have strong egos and they had enough of their ego and they want to transcend it. That's why I'm talking about thought forms, which the ego is. What you're talking about, yeah, so if you want to perfect your ego and transcend it eventually, that's what my first book is for. And I'm talking about publication dates. I'm not talking about my grand scheme that may or may not happen with book writing. So the book the book Modern Spheres Vortices is about using spiritual path to perfect your ego. There's lots of things in that those practices, by the way, the book is not enough. You need to really practice what in the book is written. That will help you become aware of different lapses, problems with your mind, ego, personality, and fix them. And this is culturally dependent and also age dependent. I mean, age in terms of like in the mid 20th century, people had different issues than in the 21st century, beginning of the 21st century. So that's really very much to the target audience of my videos and my work. This distinction. Talking about what you're talking about is that you're basically talking about being surrounded by people who do not have well-developed personalities. They are not wise. They don't understand why boundaries are important. And that has to do with the background they're from. It has to do with how they been brought up and frankly with who they are. And what I find is that when people constantly, well, first of all, when people constantly test your boundaries, and constant, of course, is the word that we need to define. If people just stumble onto your boundaries and you just say, no, sorry, please don't sit on my couch, and you say, that's all right, I won't. That's the end of it. But undeveloped personalities, like for example, my dear mommy, when I told her not to sit on my couch, she asked me why. So in other words, rather than just going and sit on multiple chairs that are available in my house, she decided to challenge me like a teenager on a very very simple request. And of course I don't have any good answer because she doesn't believe in my boundaries and she doesn't believe in that particular boundaries which happens to be mine. She doesn't believe in vibrations and doesn't believe that different people have different requirements, etc. And it shows up in many situations. Well, not with her. I mean, I shouldn't single out my mother that much, but she has many good qualities, but that isn't one of them. So this is one of those things where how do you deal with these people? I mean, can you explain to them that I'm sorry, but I really do not like when you come to my house and I don't know, do something which is like blatantly obvious. Someone can make a mistake. I don't know. I don't know. You accidentally break a dish during some dinner or something. It's like it's an accident. If it happens once in a very much while, then every person is allowed to have a number of mistakes and clumsy situations, etc. But when these things repeat again and again, when there is there's a pattern, then you have to ask yourself a question: do you want to be around those people or not? What are they bringing to you? What are these people bringing to you? Like I have a friend, who I don't think I'm going to name, and he comes. This is teenage, and he knows about it. He admitted it multiple times. He comes to my house, and he came to my house, and at that time I had a big tub of hemp oil. Like I was experimenting with the hemp oil, and I had like a 1 gallon of this oil. And he just couldn't handle himself. He had to fry potatoes in that hemp oil. And I said, you're going to burn the whole thing down. It's going to be smoke everywhere. And don't use my wok, because that wok is not worth anything. It's a bad wok. I don't have a good wok here. And guess what he did?
Exactly what you told him not to do.
Right. And to me, and this is like infuriating on a number of reasons. Number one, he doesn't understand that I have to clean this up, which is what happened. I had to clean it up. and et cetera, et cetera. And this was a simple request. It's like, it's my house. No one is asking you to make a contribution to it, especially in this way. And and when I specifically tell you don't use hemp oil to fry potatoes, it means, especially in that wok, it means I've had an experience, a similar experience before. I know about that pot, and I know about that oil. And and if you want to experiment with this kind of thing, experiment somewhere else, not in my house.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or you can come to me and say, please, I really, really need this. It's like I have this tremendous arousal around hemp oil and this wok and these potatoes. Please, oh please, oh please, oh please, can I do this? And I will look at you and say, yes, you can do it, provided you open all the windows and you really, really clean it up afterwards. Means it will be clean. And anyway, let me stop at that kind of thing, situation. These kind of people are infuriating, and they usually do not understand that they're acting like teenagers. And guess why they don't understand that they're acting like teenagers? Because they are teenagers. If they were not teenagers, they would understand this. Any reasonable person, unless they're 13 or 14 years old and you know need to assert themselves for the first time in their life, understands what I'm talking about. It's not some kind of rocket science. It's the same thing. Like, I mean, I know about your situation, that you very occasionally meet people like that, and it's like, you look at these people and say, what planet are you from?
Yeah.
And
And
another.
then also when you enforce your own boundary, they look at you like you've hurt their feelings directly, which is
Well, actually,
just
you do hurt their feelings, because they're teenagers, and
yep.
and the reaction of a teenager is, oh my God, I want to separate from you, but I can't. That's why teenagers, they talk back at parents,
Mm-hmm.
and people, etc. So this is just a teenage, it's a teenage, it's a childish, response to something fairly reasonable. And
Yeah.
like in my case, I mean, I don't want to deal with people like this at all. I mean, just yuck. So yeah, what do you do?
Well, the only thing you can do to preserve yourself is to enforce your boundaries. But if you enforce your boundaries, in you may end up pulled into conversations and interactions with the person that you're trying to protect yourself from, where they then further pummel other boundaries that you have.
Well, this is the choice you need
Because they're
to.
that, I'm sorry to interrupt, because they're that unaware.
Yeah, but here's the thing: you need to ask yourself several questions in that situation. Is your life threatened? So if your life is threatened, it's a completely different situation. I'm not talking about that. So if your life is threatened, you have many other problems. So if you're just talking in a regular, simple life situations, people are just, relatively harmless, except that they are extremely annoying on occasion, like 100 times a day. Then you
Yeah.
ask yourself, are you economically dependent on them? Do you have to be around them? Can you reasonably talk to them about it? Can you ask them to go for to go to a therapist, or a psychologist, and then ultimately you have to ask yourself a question: do you really want to be around these people who are, there's a good English word, incorrigible? They do not want to change, and we're not
Right.
asking anything, um, you know difficult. It's not, this is not, it's a simple thing, and I can tell you, this kind of situation happens a lot in cultures that like to schmooze with each other in small spaces, in limited, like constricted spaces. So Asia is a very good example of that. They used to have, I don't know, 10, 15 children. They were all living in a small room, and they were all, encroaching on each other's boundaries since early childhood. And when you're like 2 or 3 years old, you do not understand that this toy is yours, or I mean, rather, this toy belongs to another kid. You just pull it, and and depending on your strength and your ability to cry, and on the agreeableness of another child, you confiscate that toy, and it becomes yours. And then your parents come in and they say, no, 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 this is not your toy, and they give it back to the first child forcefully, without good explanation, like this is yours, and this is Johnny's, this is yours, and this is Janie's, like that. And you can see the sarcasm in my voice, because
Yeah.
if you are older than 15 and you don't understand things like that, well, first of all, you probably never will understand that. Another thing that I find crazy is that many times people are very polite and particular about boundaries of someone they do not know well, and maybe their boss. But when they are with their parents, sisters, brothers, wives, husband, suddenly their boundaries become looser. They suddenly and there's a difference, like if you're sick, I don't know, cold, and on, and you're not feeling very well, and you want to eat, I don't know, roasted potatoes, and your husband hates that, and you just, without asking, just do that, that can be chucked away for, that you are not in a good mood. And if it happens occasionally, it's most certainly should be overlooked. It's not a big deal.
Right.
But if a person is perfectly healthy, they're just selfish, and we'll talk about selfishness in about a second. Well, we're talking about what we've been talking about for the last few minutes. Selfishness is a big issue here. So there are two kinds of selfishness: functional selfishness and dysfunctional selfishness. Selflessness does not exist. That's bullshit. So if I want something, I want something. If I want you to do something, I want you to do something. You are not selfless when you do something for me. You're doing it out of love, uh, and so you're selfish because you're looking at your connection, your love towards me. So basically, when someone tells you that you are selfish, what they're really talking about is that you are not important, they are important. In other words, when someone calls you selfish, it basically implies that they want you to do what they want in their selfish ways, not what you want. And none of the stuff we're talking about is about adjusting and finding common ground, etc. Like, for example, when you visit me and when we talk, we have zero problems, adjusting with each other, because, it's easy. You just communicate. It's like, I would like to go to a Greek restaurant, and I say, no, let's go to Thai food, and we decide one day we go to Greek and one day we go to Thai, and it's not a big deal. And I'm sure if you're like, one day you just have to cure yourself psychologically with Thai food, we'll go to Thai food. It's not going to be a very big deal. And of course, it becomes a big deal if, like, you decide that I don't know, you want to jump off off an airplane with a parachute, and I hate that, and the very idea is weird for me. Then we have a conflict. In that case, we're not friends. We're not going to get married. We're not going to whatever. Or we're going to figure out something and we stay together. No two people are completely compatible in their desires. That just doesn't happen. But boundaries is something else. Boundary is not about compatibility of desires. It's about respecting what other person wants, desires, feels, etc. So if I tell you that I'm irritated right now, normal person will not bother me. They will leave me alone so that I will, cool off. Or alternatively, you can ask, me, I know you're irritated right now, anything I can do to help? And I'll say, I don't know, make me mint tea or something. And to me, all this discussion is like, it's like, if it's not obvious by the time you're 15, oh God. What is not obvious is, pre-egoic, trans-egoic, and egoic development. That is not obvious for most
people. Interesting.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, the question. So let's assume for a moment that you are surrounded by people who do not respect your boundaries. So the question to ask, not why they are not respecting your boundaries. That is obvious. They're teenagers, overgrown teenagers who need to have psychotherapy. The question is why you are tolerating, why are you, why you are tolerating this kind of behavior from them. And I'm not talking about fixing them. I'm talking about fixing you. Like why are you tolerating this kind of behavior towards yourself? And again, it could be a variety of things. It could be your living situation, your economic situation, your abusive situation. How much you're threatened. It could be cultural situation. For example, when I go to India, boundaries in India are different. People there are much more close tight, and they many times tend to violate boundaries as would Westerners see it, which is not a violation in that culture. It's just much more flexible culture than we have here in the U.S. In the West, let's say.
Right.
But going back to the question of why you're tolerating this kind of thing towards you, that's a question that you need to ask. It's a big question, and it could be because you're too soft for these people, and maybe you need to get out of there because frankly, this is the reason why I don't want to jump off an airplane, because I'm suspecting that it's not going to go well for my psyche. That kind of testing myself with fear, may end up having a very, very tight stomach to a point that I'll be constipated for 2 weeks or something. I mean, of course, I'm joking. I don't know what's going to happen. It may be just the opposite. I'll end up, expressing myself in a certain way while flying, down to earth, and
right.
I'm going to land and we'll have to do laundry or something. All of that kind of stuff is there. So that, yeah, that's what it is. And it could be it could be that you really, really like, I mean, I shouldn't talk about you specifically. I don't actually know your situation, but say, for example, you tolerate your husband because the house he is providing for you is really nice and spacious and amazing, and and it's worth it for you to deal with his bad boundaries because he has a lot of money and you have many rooms and they're all painted in nice ways, and you can buy a new, well, he can buy you a new car and a new iPhone and take you to I don't know, take you to Mallorca, and you will luxuriate yourself in a 5-star hotel or 7-star hotel. I didn't even know until recently that those existed, but apparently they do. So different people have different requirements, but people who I'm interested in is like, I mean, I like to be around people who do not test my boundaries in a teenage ways unless they're teenagers. And frankly, if you're a teenager, that's wonderful. I am very happy to have you nearby, provided you have well-expressed spiritual desire. Then your developmental issues we can fix. That applies actually to any young person. It starts to become fairly toxic by the time you get to 35, 40, if your boundaries are bad and you're developmentally stunted, but you also have strong spiritual component. Well, if you have a lot of money and a strong spiritual desire, come this way. Put your money forward first for something.
Exactly.
What?
Exactly. No, exactly.
Yeah. You know, when I think I told this to you a million of times, when I used to work as a professor in that place right here, my secretary used to say that, you know, for $100 an hour, I'll talk to anyone, you know. So the same way, it's like, you know, if you're willing to, you know, to advance a lot of money, I'm sure there will be a threshold at which point I'll say, I don't care how spiritual you are. Money is good, you know, something like that. But the good news for me is that, you know, I have so many wonderful people around me who don't have this kind of issues, and I don't have issue with money. Well, unless you want to buy me a yacht, you know, that would be interesting. Instead of having an ashram on land, we will have an ashram in a yacht, you know.
Hmm.
So this could be very interesting. It's like it'll have like a, you know, $2-3 million or $300 million yacht, and we will have a nice meditation room, and we'll have classes there, you know, and we will be all very spiritual and bathe in the sea until a shark comes and goes,
Mm-hmm.
something like that, or until you violate our boundaries enough, and the shark will come and say, "Please, I'm hungry," and then an oops event will happen. And you will be very sorry, and the shark will be very, very happy, or something like that.
Yeah.
Sorry for my dark humor.
No, no, not at all.
So, are you satisfied?
I believe so.
Nice to see you all on YouTube, and you have a very good Happy New Year, and what else? And goodbye.